Hello. In this video, we'll be looking at the human activities in California grasslands and the synergistic effects on grasslands. So let's get started and see if we can do this in less than 9 minutes. The assignment will look like this, but you'll see that in the PowerPoint. So let's get on to the PowerPoint. Cumulative and synergistic effects on the grasslands of the Brentwood area. So if you remember, synergistic sort of means cumulative. It is the effects of more than one activity on an area at a time. Record your answers on this document that is attached to your weekly work. So you'll be recording your answers to each of the questions as we move through. First question: would building a single home or farm or road destroy a grassland ecosystem? So remember, before they had the farms, there was a grassland here. Right, and so would building this farm destroy the grassland ecosystem? Would building roads going to different farms or to different cities destroy the grassland ecosystem? Would building a farm in an area destroy the grassland ecosystem? So if you need to stop the video, please stop the video and answer that question. Next question: does the size of the road or farm have anything to do with how much a grassland ecosystem is disturbed or destroyed? So if we have roads this size or this size, will that affect any more or less than having a road this size? So does the size of a road affect the grassland ecosystem? If you need to stop the video, please do so. 1,000 homes will have a cumulative effect on the grassland. Please list these additional structures. Please list 3 additional structures that would need to be built to support the people living in 1,000 homes that have been built on a grassland. So we have 1,000 homes built on an area that used to be a grassland. This used to be a grassland. Now 1,000 homes are built on it. We need to list 3 additional structures that would need to be built to support this number of homes. So some of those structures are in this video. So we have Diamond Hill Sports Club. We have Full Steam Academy. We have Almond Grove Elementary School. We have Magnolia Park, we have Stonecott Drive, and Freedom High School. So those are only a few of the structures that are needed to support 1,000 homes. What are some other things that are needed in an area to support you living in that area or families living in that area? Please record those on your answer document. So the next questions we'll deal with this chart. The chart above shows the accumulating effects of human activities on the land and ecosystems that Brentwood established on. Questions 4, 5, 6, and 7 deal with this diagram, and that should be on the second page of your activity. It is called Diagram A. So moving through this activity real quick before we get to the questions, we have human activities. So prevent controlled burns. So the Indians used to do controlled burns in an area, and that stopped ecological succession, the changing of a grassland into a shrubland into a forest. So if you could prevented the controlled burns, it would allow the succession from a grassland to a woodland. Building homes or houses, we're going to figure out what the effect is. Building roads destroys grassland habitats. Grazing livestock year-round packs soil and native grasses. So packed soil so native grasses cannot survive. Plowing to create farmlands, plowing to create farmlands. Grasslands plant seeds do not sprout. Gophers and other species may damage the soil. And planting plants with disease, crop plants replace native plants. The diseases can also be transferred to native plants, but because the crops are growing better, because there's no disease to affect them or native bugs are not affecting them, they will grow better. And then we're looking at introduced native plants and how will that affect an area. So these are accumulating effects, and these accumulating effects can have a synergistic effect that will cause something. So what will these activities do in your synergy all together to a grassland area and to the species living on it? And that's what we're looking at in questions 4, 5, 6, and 7. So let's get started on this. Please consider the development of the Brentwood area since the 1850s until the present. The land was originally grassland, marshes, then cattle. So originally, the land around this area looked like this: grassland, delta. It would flood in the summer, so we'd have a lot of native grasses and tules. And this is what it looks like now. Okay, and this is in between. So originally it was grassland, and then came cattle and farming, and now we have cattle, farming, and urban. We have people living here also. So look at box A. What effects did building houses and other buildings have on the native plants in this area? So what effects did, let me get my laser pointer here. So what effects did building houses have on this area? Okay, look at box B. What effects did introducing non-native plants have on native plants and animals in this area? So again, we used to be here. We introduced non-native plants to the grasslands. What happened to the grasslands of this area because of this introduction of non-native plants? What happened to the grasslands and the native plants that were in this area? So now we're down to box C. So human activities had synergistic effects, a process whereby two or more factors acting together cause greater effects than the sum of the effects on the individual factors. So just this individual factor will not have as much effect as all of these together on this. So two or more factors acting together cause greater effects than the sum of the effects of the individual factors and their individual effects on the native grassland. The introduction of non-native plants by early European settlers to this area had a synergistic effect on the native plants because of their activities that resulted in from these settlers. Please write what you think the synergistic effect of the human activities from the settlers listed in the chart below would have on native grasslands in the Brentwood area. So because of these effects, what would happen to the grasslands in this area? So again, here's what the grasslands used to look like, historical image, and this is what they look like now. So what was the effect of grazing, plowing, introducing non-native species, and planting plants with diseases? What did that do to the grassland area in this area? Do you think human activities have had a long-term or short-term effect on the grasslands of California? So this is what the grasslands used to look like. This is the San Ramon area, and this is that area more recently. So do you think this is a short-term or a long-term effect? Support your opinion with evidence from the photographs from before or from here. Finally, we get to our last question. So the water hyacinth is the phenomenon that we're looking at in these lessons, and we are looking to see how will the water hyacinth affect the delta. So how will the synergistic effects of fishing, introduced plants, introduced critters, water activities have on water ecosystems in the delta? So I'm going to give you a little background on some of these things so that you can answer this better. So we have fishing for bass. Well, if you did not know, bass are non-native species. They were introduced in the early 1900s as a sports fish so that we could have sports fishing in this area. right? But they are not native. We do have a bass in our garden if you'd like to go see one. They are voracious eaters, which means they eat almost everything. We have invasive crayfish, and again, crayfish were not native to this area either, and this is a crayfish with babies, and they were introduced and they have taken over. Now, this is not necessarily always a bad thing, because crayfish are also food for river otters, which are native species, and they eat a lot of these, and they're also the nymphs are also food for other fish in this area, but they are not from here, and so because they are very prolific, they have a lot of babies, they cause an effect on the native critters. Okay, we have the Asian clams. Asian clams are what we call filter feeders. They take in food by filtering it through the water, and it turns out that native fish tend to eat phytoplankton, which grows in the delta, and the phytoplankton feeds zooplankton, and zooplankton then feed the native fish, like the delta smelt. Well, when we have a lot of these, they filter feed and they reduce the amount of phytoplankton and zooplankton in an area, and so the amount of food for the delta smelt will go down. So Asian clams, an invasive species that is living in this area. Houseboating. One of the big draws to this area is in the summer is houseboating, where people can come and rent a houseboat, and they do water activities with gasoline-powered machines, where they're out in their paddle boat. And because of these activities, they like to keep the delta clean, and so people tend to get rid of other species like the water hyacinth by spraying it or chopping it up, so that there can be an economy for these houseboats. So houseboating. We have, of course, the introduced water hyacinth, which they need to control so that houseboating will work. And this was a pond plant that can grow very quickly in the delta, as we've talked about before. So how will that affect? And finally, repairing levees. So this is actually going on now. I'm making this video in July, and if you are on the deltas, the levees, you'll actually see that they're repairing them. They are putting rocks onto the levee sides, preparing for winter, right? Because these rocks will not allow for the dirt to be pushed away, which would cause breaks in the levee, which would flood the farmlands on the other side. So how does repairing the levee and fixing it affect the delta? So with those things, please write your opinion. How will the synergistic effects of fishing, introduced plants, introduced critters, water activities have on the water ecosystem of the delta? That concludes this activity. If you have any other further questions, please see your science teacher.